Hello, this is the Radio Academy podcast. My name is Christian Hewgill, and there can be loads of different reasons to make radio, can't there? One of my personal favourites is, well, this would be a laugh, wouldn't it? And that is one of the key mantras of this show.
Radio 1 Breakfast with Greg James.
Good morning! Thursday's Radio 1 Breakfast. Thank you, Ariel Free and Roisin Hasty. Hello!
For several years now, Greg and his team have been doing big summer stunts. And today we're going to find out from two of the show's producers, Leila Mitwally and Chris Sawyer, just how they managed to organise and pull off this year's, hiding jigsaw pieces all over the UK and getting them back to Greg James to piece together in some water in Brighton. But before that, let's go back to how all these events started, with a big game of hide and seek.
That has always been talked about as the time that Radio 1 first went for a really huge creative project. It was back in 2018. What we did was we took Greg and Nick Grimshaw and hid them and hid their show that they were doing in a random place in the UK and said, we are going to stay on Radio 1 until you find us. And it was as simple as that. And then when we did it, the response was just nuts, like nothing we'd ever done before. Basically, everything we've done since has tried to capture that same spirit of giving radio listeners something they can obsess over for not just the short time the radio show's on, not just a couple of radio shows, but days and days of radio.
So they've sort of felt quite organically since then. It was like the success of that's led to you doing more rather than you going, right, we're going to do one of these every year.
Yeah, I mean, I think listeners have started to spot now that there does seem to be one sort of most of the time in that summer slot. It started with hide and seek. We then did an escape room. Then we came back and did another hide and seek. That time, Greg and Grimmy were hiding on Weston-super-Mare Pier. We've also done the Radio 1 treasure hunt, which was a similar scale where we hid a golden ticket that got you into loads of festivals. Then Who's Got Greg was one that a lot of people found out about on the morning that Greg didn't turn up for his show after the Brits. People thought initially it was because he was hungover. We kind of let them think that for a bit because that was a very good way to get some publicity for the start of that project. And then coronavirus happened and we wanted to do something of that scale, but no one was allowed to be in the BBC building. And so that was where we came up with Up Yours, Corona, which was a phrase that one of our listeners said. They were so annoyed at the coronavirus, as we all were, that they shouted, Up Yours, Corona. And that tiny moment then spanned out to the idea that we would get someone from every single country across planet Earth to shout, Up Yours, Corona. Just to finish the story of our creative projects, we also did the summer breakout where we locked Greg in a camper van. But that brings us up to date on up to the Jigsaw, which was just a few weeks ago.
We are heading to the beach for the Radio 1 Games. I'm suspicious for so many reasons about all of this. I think it might change to something else.
Mr. Greg James, stop broadcasting. You need to follow us right now.
It's our show now.
The Radio 1
Giant Jigsaw.
It's a Radio 1 logo that's been broken into 20 pieces, scattered across the country.
Greg will need to build it on the lake next to him.
Totally unnecessary, but funny because it means you have to go for a little dip.
Leila, where did the idea for a jigsaw come from? I mean, in Radio 1 breakfast terms, I'm not asking you to detail the invention of the jigsaw. I'm aware that had been done before. But when did you first think, let's do a jigsaw on the radio? Because it doesn't scream Radio Gold, does it?
No, and I think we've been saying for a while that actually the name in itself sounds quite boring. Like a jigsaw inherently sounds like quite a boring game. But this idea came up many, many months before I was brought onto the project myself. So Chris and the breakfast team were, I think, batting around ideas, correct me if I'm wrong, pre-Christmas, right?
Yeah. We were thinking for weeks about what this project would be. We knew that sort of like October, November, December time last year, we were going to do something big in July. And we kind of had to match the scale and size of the previous projects we'd done. And we came up with loads and loads of things that weren't quite right. And actually the moment we got on the path that eventually led to us doing the jigsaw was I was in my friend's car on a weekend away in Norfolk, and I saw the BBC Radio Norfolk radio car was out and about doing their treasure hunt thing that they do. And I just got really jealous of it. I was like, that idea of having a reporter going out and looking for something real and going and talking to people as they're going about their day, especially on a weekend, out and about at tourist sites and those kind of things. And I thought, how could we have a little bit of that feeling on the breakfast show? That then led to, okay, maybe it's not a treasure hunt Maybe it's like just going and getting specific objects that Greg needs. And then we hit on the idea of, maybe it's a Radio 1 Rogue logo split up into bits and they could be hidden all over the country. And then someone in another meeting said, hang on, you've taken a thing and you've split it into bits. That's a jigsaw. And we were, oh yeah, it's a jigsaw. That's what we're talking about. And all of a sudden we were doing a jigsaw. And then Leila, at some point, I then had to explain to you what it was. And please tell me, how did that conversation go? I don't even remember it.
You explained to me what it was, I think, about 2 days before I started working on it. You explained it to me in the same conversation as saying what it was actively I was going to have to do. So you went, right, stick with me here. We're making a giant jigsaw. What I need you to do is find 20 different places in the UK to send pieces to. And I need you to do that tomorrow. And I was like...
It sounded like it was hard work, and it was, right?
Oh, God, yeah, of course it was.
Where do you start? When Chris has had that conversation with you and he walks out the room and you're there in front of your laptop or your computer, it's like, right... Where do you go from there? How do you possibly start planning putting a jigsaw all across the country?
You think of... So we had conversations about the nature of the places that these would be found in. So we wanted some of them to be in like big landmarks. We wanted some of them to be in places where you would never expect to find them. But then we also wanted some that would just be around, because we wanted the idea to be that you could feasibly come across them anywhere. So it was kind of a thing of thinking, right, what's the span of this going to be? First, the geographical span, and then working from there, like how many do we need that are going to be out in the open? So we had some in parks. Like I said, we have 3 or 4 that you could literally pick up on the street. Then there are a couple that we wanted to be stunts. So there are a couple that we were like, we'll hold them back because they'll be the ones that we kind of push to if they appear on different things. They'll appear on BBC One, on sporting events, stuff like that. And then there were a few at the end that we just wanted to make as stupid as possible, which I think is the case with all of these.
I'm at the Lionesses game. I've just seen the piece behind Gabby Logan.
We found the jigsaw piece at Land's End.
It was picked up by an actual pilot called Charlie.
I just offered my services to fly up to Exeter for them.
We live around the corner from Exeter Airport, so we said, why not? Let's just go and get them.
You're going to have to dive off the diving board.
Okay, when you're going from 10 metre, you're going to hit at 35 miles an hour. That's car crash speed. And he's in!
At least 3 of them, it was just, how can we make this more ridiculous than it already is?
It strikes me that you're thinking, how can we make a nice little bit of radio out of each individual bit of jigsaw?
Exactly, yeah. So it was mapping out where these pieces would go, the kind of places we wanted them to be, the kind of people that we wanted to find them, and to make sure that each of those would create its own little narrative for us to use over the however many days it was, 6 days? The first day of thinking of those things was insane. And I mean, no actual work got done. We were just going, where? Where? What? And also how? I remember my first call to a courier to say, I've got 20 foam pieces of jigsaw. They're all just over 1 metre squared. Can you post them to 20 different places in the UK? And they just went, what? Where? What do you mean? And I was like, well, I'm not sure. Like, it's just figuring out those really, really simple parts of it were the first, the first day was just how the hell are we going to do this?
And Chris, you've done a brilliant Twitter thread explaining loads of it, and you've done those with other of the big projects as well. One of the ones I like on your Twitter thread is where you say that there was a bit of a backup plan in case one got nicked, because let's be honest, people love nicking radio merchandise, let alone when it's something like this.
You know what? With all of these projects, there's always one worry that's going round and round and round in my head right up until the moment we launch. The thing that feels like the bit where you're going to be made to look really stupid, where the whole thing's going to fall down and someone's going to turn around to you afterwards and say, why were you so stupid as to think that would work? And with that, the thing that I was so paranoid about was we always do these things for real, but we never want our presenters to have to, fudge something on air or get excited about something which for real isn't actually exciting behind the scenes. So the way we approach all these projects is it has to actually happen. These jigsaw pieces have to be out there in the wild, and people will just find them, and the phone will ring because someone's got the phone number off the back and phoned Greg in his little office on Brighton Seafront to tell him he's got the piece, and we put ourselves in the hands of the listeners like that. And that meant that if anyone wanted to, they could pick up those pieces and just take them home. and not ring and just have them as like a beer trophy. You know, I can imagine a student room with like a traffic cone on one side and a jigsaw piece on the other, right? So that was what was going through my head the whole time.
And didn't that need to come in, though? You needed the backup, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, no one stole any, but actually every single person that found a piece rang in straight away and was amazing on the radio.
I was about to say, though, there were a couple, I remember there were 2 instances of sheer panic because obviously each piece had a plaque on the back with the number to call. And each piece we had sent out to somebody at that location. So, like, for instance, the one we sent up to the Science Centre in Glasgow, there was a guy to receive it there, and he put it out and he was looking at it. And I got a text from that guy saying, "It's gone, by the way, somebody's taken it." And the lag between that happening and us getting the phone call from somebody who'd taken it made us go, "Oh my God, it's gone." Like, we were just going, like, all it took was 10 minutes to go, if they haven't called it by now, we're completely screwed. We've lost a piece. We've, like, somebody's nicked it. So there was a couple of times where we did think that had happened, but thankfully it actually never did.
It turns out radio listeners are amazing and we should have had more faith in them. The people we shouldn't have had faith in is delivery companies, because the reason we had to use the backup piece was, I'm going to be really careful talking about this because Leila's still not ready to confront it, and I think needs to. Okay. Genuinely, some of the worst days of our professional lives, me and Leila, when 4 out of the 20 pieces got lost by their delivery companies.
Oh, no.
Which, I mean, we won't name the companies, but it was...
no, of course not.
We were furious. There's always something in these projects which means that you are working very, very, very long hours and pulling your hair out. And this time round, it was delivery companies.
But it gives us that classic bit of radio advice that we all get earlier in our careers. Make sure you've got a backup. And you had a backup, so it's fine. Okay, so you've got the pieces out. You've decided what's going to make good radio. You've eventually got past delivery companies. When they start to be found at that point, are you guys thinking, okay, this is going quite well. They're starting to be found. We're getting there. Is that where you can slightly relax or not?
Well, I actually think that's where it all kicked into like 5th gear because once they were all out, people finding them, because of the places that we put them, because some of them were just out in the open, some of them were, like I said, one was in a science centre which wouldn't open till a specific time and it was quite well hidden. We had kind of an idea in our heads and thought like, well, surely the one that's out in a park in Skegness is going to get found first. So we'd kind of tried to imagine what the immediate response would be and which ones would start to come in first. But as soon as it went out and as soon as we announced it on the radio, that all went to pot. And we were just getting the ones that we expected nobody would find for days were coming in like that. And then we had to figure out how we could spread out these narratives because we just had like 5 pieces immediately want to come back. And how do you reflect that on the radio? And
that's where then... being on Radio 1, really, but you realise what a luxury it is to be surrounded by so many amazing teams because you can, what we ended up doing was sort of dishing out those narratives, right, Leila? So we're going, okay, there's a really interesting story about the piece coming from Land's End, which is like hitching a lift on an aeroplane that happens to be flying in a particular direction. And so then we could kind of give that story to Ricky, Melvin and Charlie's team and go, okay, you and your listeners follow that bit of it. Well, listen, the best bit of radio, or one of the best bits of radio, is telling stories. So you're just telling individual stories of individual jigsaw pieces, right? Yeah. And some of those we kind of knew how the story would go. The best example of that probably is on the Sunday where there was a piece that wasn't being found in Cardiff for some reason. And so we said, well, okay, well, we'll help you find it. But if we're going to help you, we're also going to have to sort of, give you a little bit of a punishment as well. So that piece was found in Cardiff, but it was frozen in a block of ice. And so we knew that it was down to the weather, but we knew it was going to take roughly between about 4 and 6 hours for that ice to melt. Yeah. And so that was we knew that story would last all the way through Sunday on the radio. So that was in our power. And then things like a kid called Harry doing a cycle ride, raising money for hedgehogs, finding the piece at Land's End. That was amazing. He was one of the best callers we've had on the Breakfast Show all year. Could never have planned that in a million years. Likewise, one of the pieces ended up being taken by a listener who lived in Brighton, so could bring it home with them to Brighton. But the reason they were coming to London was that they were going to see the Haim gig at the O2 that night. So they suggested, completely off their own back, that they take the jigsaw piece to the O2 Arena we had to do some phone calls quite a lot of phone calls behind the scenes to get permission for that piece to go to the Heim gig. And then the next morning we all wake up and see that loads of people who've been at that Heim gig have lost their minds because they've secretly brought Taylor Swift out to perform with them on stage. And so the thing we're able to say on the breakfast show as we start the next day is this Jigsaw piece has been in the same room as Taylor Swift. And God knows we would have loved to have been able to know that was coming, but we had no idea.
We had to try and get it down to Brighton somehow, didn't we?
I live in Brighton. I've come up to see Heim.
Heim have said it's totally fine to bring in the Jigsaw piece.
It had like its own little private area. It was great.
It lasted longer than others have done. So it was 6 days, wasn't it, before it was all finally found. How do you look back at the process of it being found? Did it all go to plan? Did it last as long as you'd hoped it would last?
Well, we'd planned for up to 6 days, and it was 6 days. So Leila knows what it was like, particularly what I was like. On the night, the end of day 5, knowing that we had to wrap it up on day 6 was quite a lot, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had up to day 6, so we knew that by the end of that Monday we've had to come up with some kind of finale for it. But because there were pieces still travelling from all over the UK, we couldn't know at what point that would happen. We couldn't know at what time he would be able to put them all in, what time the final piece would need to be found. So there was a lot of, that Sunday night was a lot of like contingency plans. That final piece that was found buried in the beach, we had planned to do, but couldn't know when it was going to be found. And there was a Fatboy Slim concert going on down the beach, and me and another producer, Tom, went to the beach the night before to try and bury it on the beach. And it was about 11:30, and we were getting up to do the breakfast show, and we went to try and bury it, and the security guards went, "That's not this," because we had security like around the truck, and they went, "That's not going to happen." And we're like, "What? We need to bury it here because, you know, it's got to be here for tomorrow." And he went, "But the drunk people from the Fatboy Slim concert keep coming up here and starting fires and drinking on the beach. So if you bury it here tonight, it will be gone or destroyed by tomorrow." So we had to go back. We had to wake up first thing in the morning. We were down there at 4 a.m. to bury this thing in the pebbles, which was hard.
And by the way, shout out to Fatboy Slim. Can I just say, this was another put the things out in the world and see what happens. It turns out, entirely coincidentally, the place we'd parked the big Radio 1 outside broadcast truck on Brighton seafront was about 2 doors down from Fatboy Slim's house. And then he was an incredible help all the way through, and ended up sort of there's a cafe that he owns where he ended up doing catering for some of the BBC crew and all that stuff. So the most amazingly helpful guy. And then also it turns out his daughter, Nellie, is a huge fan of the Radio 1 Breakfast Show, even though her mum presents the Radio 2 breakfast show. Keep that secret. And then she came down and hung out with Greg, and there's amazing photos of the two of them sort of behind the Radio 1 desk and stuff like that. So yeah, just another one of those bizarre things that you'd never have planned for.
And there's one piece remaining. It's got to be the metal detector guy. I'm going to go on the beach now. I'm just going to go and try and find it. I've got some beeping. Can you hear me beeping?
Yes.
Oh, there.
Have you found it?
Yes!
Oh, you found it!
And here we are. We've got a crowd gathered. I'm in the lagoon.
Hey!
Radio 1's giant jigsaw is... Hang on. I might need to climb up. It's quite a tricky situation, this last one. It's complete!
Hey!
Oh, boy!
How do you look back at it, guys? You must be really pleased with the way it went.
It feels like we're still too close to it and still too shaky.
It's a bit soon, to be honest.
I think we're very pleased though, right?
We're extremely pleased. I think the main takeaway, planning around them, my main takeaway was so much of that could have gone wrong. And we were so lucky that it didn't. Like, all of the kind of different things that we'd planned for somehow in the end came off. All of those little plans that we put in place would never have come off had the right people not found them.
I'm starting to kind of be far enough away from it to have some perspective on it. And I feel like this is probably one of the things I'm most proud of anything we've done at Radio 1.
And so you should be, guys. Congratulations and good luck with coming up with something for next year now.
God, I mean, yeah, bit too on the nose there, Christian. That's literally the next meeting.
That was fascinating. I loved finding out just how much planning and the level of detail that goes into producing one of the biggest moments of the year on one of the biggest shows in the country. Now, I mentioned Chris's Twitter thread on how they do all this stuff. If you want to read that, go to @Radio Academy on Twitter. We've tagged Chris on there so you know where to find him. And if you search Radio 1 Jigsaw, you can watch and listen to loads of highlights. Now, next week, why are we talking about pirates? Well, because we just are.
You're listening to Absolute Radio Pirates.
Absolute Radio Pirates.
John Holmes joins us to talk about the new pop-up station celebrating all things pirate radio, Absolute Radio Pirates. Hit subscribe to get a new episode from us every single Wednesday, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye for now.